So when Kim and I were thinking about this article, there were really three questions that we were curious to hear industry executives respond to. The first question is, what are they doing to create a balance between this tension between innovating for the future? What are they putting in place for the future while dealing with necessary efficiencies of the present to drive performance? Second question was, how are they actually going about creating greater agility across their organization through empowerment and trust? And then lastly, we really wanted them to help us understand what are they putting in place that creates a safe environment that fosters this higher willingness to have courage, to try things, to be willing to innovate, to be willing to try new things, to assume risk. So a special thanks to those who participated in these interviews. Alex Johnson from Facebook, representing the owner. We had Scott Moss from Moss Construction and James Anderson from Bartlett Cock representing the construction side of things. And lastly, Don Stone, CEO and president of Dewberry, representing the voice of the design community.
One of the themes that we found that was really interesting is all four of these organizations operate under a decentralized structure. Think about that for a minute. That takes a long time to put into place and to empower leaders in various parts of the country or various markets to be fully empowered to run their portion of the business. Now obviously they take a long time to put into place, and so these were structures that were put into place before the pandemic had hit. And when things got really, really uncertain, when things turned very ambiguous, this is when those leaders started to lean heavily on their decentralized structures, because they asked their leaders to figure out what was happening in their specific situation and to respond in the best way that made sense for them at the time. By creating a learning culture, it creates a safe space for people to be able to have a conversation about what worked and what we should keep doing in the future. It also creates a safe space to say, I made a mistake, and what can I do differently? Can you help me talk through it? All of these leaders realize that how I respond in that moment and how other leaders respond in that moment will set the tone for whether or not the next generation or the next person's really willing to try something new in the future. It creates a very safe environment for others to be able to try new things.
So what we hope the readers will take away from this article is maybe a found or a newfound acknowledgement that in times of uncertainty and challenge, it's probably less about adopting clever new innovation for innovation's sake. And it's more recognizing that it still comes down to those fundamentals. How do we create higher levels of engagement across organization? How do we build agile, empowered, trust-based teams? And then how do we as leaders essentially create those kind of environments that are mentally and physically safe, but also creating a culture that puts emphasis on courage, puts emphasis on continuous learning, puts emphasis on accountability, emphasis on essentially people matter, and how we treat each other, how we engage each other, how we build relationships, how we move forward as an ecosystem towards a greater outcome is really what it comes down to, whether here in good times or in challenging times or uncertain times.